I work for the Committee on Climate Change in the UK. So our role is to provide independent advice to the government on tackling climate change, and principally that's advising on greenhouse gas emissions targets, which the government then sets into law. I think the Hermitage project is really valuable in linking together all sorts of different models that are really important for the decision-making process in tackling climate change. So you have climate modelers developed by physical scientists, you have land use models developed by agricultural scientists and other geophysicists. You have economic models looking at the energy system and how that works, and these are all traditionally built by different institutions with different academic disciplines, often speaking different technical languages, and yet they all have important contributions to make to the decision-making process. One particular area at the moment which is discussed a lot in policy circles is the use of bioenergy to meet climate change targets. So this is the idea that you can grow crops, some crops that are already used for food, other oil crops or woody crops, and you can burn those for energy. And this raises all sorts of important and interlinked questions about whether these really deliver emissions reductions, whether you can do this sustainably while still feeding a growing population, whether we have enough water resources to grow these things. And so linking together all these models in the way that Hermitage does can help to provide answers to these questions. Well, I hope that over the next couple of years that the links between these models can help us to start answering some really thorny questions, such as those on bioenergy, and provide really more robust data and more sort of real-world type situations to really sort of question these assumptions that come from simply using the models on their own. Well, it's a global problem, so it's going to require everybody to do something, and so you need the whole world on board rather than just a few countries. And at the same time, we're talking about avoiding some of the impacts of climate change by actually largely changing the way we produce energy and produce food as a society. So it's a big challenge. But I think it's also encouraging that a number of countries are starting to take a move on things, and large organisations as well. So I think there are some signs of progress. Well, it's true to say that since the global negotiations started in the 1990s, emissions have carried on rising, so we haven't been able to turn around emissions yet. But there are negotiations on the table now for a globally binding deal, so not just a Kyoto Protocol style deal where the industrialized nations are involved, but a deal where all the nations of the world are involved, and that's being negotiated over the next few years. And I think it's also important to remember that climate change is an issue that's going to be with us for many decades, for hundreds of years even. And so a lack of progress in the first 10 years doesn't necessarily mean there'll be no progress over the next decade and the next 100 years. I'm a natural optimist, so I think that people will find a way to solve the climate change problem to a large degree. I think it's promising that we've identified it through the scientific knowledge that we have already. In relatively early days of climate change, it's quite hard to see with the naked eye that the climate has changed, but we have a lot of observations which are telling us early in the game that we need to do something. I think it's a problem that will be with us for many decades. It's a kind of chronic problem. It's not something where there is a yes-no solution to whether you've solved it or not. But I think we're making great strides, and so I'm optimistic.